Dominic Ashford's hand trembled as he reached for the Scotch decanter. The crystal caught the dying light of Christmas Eve, throwing fractured rainbows across the white marble floor. 42 stories above Manhattan, his penthouse stretched in every direction like a beautiful cage, all chrome and glass and suffocating silence. He poured 3 fingers of whiskey neat, the same amount he'd poured every Christmas Eve for the past 15 years. A ritual, a reminder, a punishment. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city glittered with 1,000 holiday lights, each one a small knife, reminding him of what normal people did on Christmas Eve. They gathered. They laughed. They belonged to someone. Dominic belonged to no one. He didn't hear Sophia Hill enter. She had a way of moving through his space like water, quiet and inevitable. 3 months she'd been his housekeeper, and in that time, she'd never once looked at him the way everyone else did, with that mixture of awe and calculation, wondering what they could get from the great Dominic Ashford. Instead, she looked at him like he was a puzzle she hadn't quite solved, like she could see the pieces that didn't fit, the edges that had been forced into the wrong places. Mr. Ashford. Her voice cut through the quiet, warm and steady. I've left your dinner in the kitchen. The salmon with. I'm sure it's fine, he interrupted, not turning around. You can go now, Miss Hill. Enjoy your holiday. The silence that followed felt different somehow. Heavier. He could feel her studying him, that damned observant gaze of hers taking in the untouched meals from the past 3 days still sitting on his counter. The way his shoulders curved inward like a man bracing for impact, the hidden bottle of sleeping pills on his nightstand that he pretended she didn't know about. It's Christmas Eve, she said finally. I'm aware of the date, Ms. Hill. His voice came out sharper than he intended. That's why I'm giving you the evening off. I'm making tamales tonight. The words came out in a rush, like she'd been holding them back and finally let them loose. My abuela's recipe, the one she brought from Oaxaca, takes all day to make them right. The masa has to be perfect, and the pork needs to simmer for hours with chili Colorado, and she stopped, took a breath. You're welcome to join me. Now he did turn. Sophia stood in the doorway, her coat already buttoned, her dark hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't pity. Her eyes held something else entirely, recognition, maybe understanding. That's inappropriate, he said, but his voice came out uncertain, questioning. Is it? Sophia tilted her head slightly. I'm inviting you to dinner, Mr. Ashford, as one human being to another. Nothing inappropriate about that. You work for me. Not tonight, I don't. Tonight I'm off the clock, and I'm making tamales, and I have way too much food for one person. She paused, and something vulnerable flickered across her face. It's Christmas Eve. No one should be alone tonight. The words hit harder than they should have. Dominic turned back to the window, gripping his glass so hard he thought it might shatter. I'm fine alone. Are you? The question was gentle, but it stripped him bare nonetheless. He didn't answer, couldn't answer. Sophia was quiet for a long moment. Then, apartment 4C, 451, Prospect Avenue in Brooklyn. 7:30, if you change your mind. Her footsteps moved toward the door, then stopped. I know what it's like, Mr. Ashford, being alone in a new city during the holidays. Pretending you're fine when you're really just surviving. The invitation stands. The door clicked shut behind her, and Dominic stood frozen in his palace of glass and steel, her words echoing in the emptiness she'd left behind. For 20 minutes, he paced. This was absurd. She was an employee. No, an ex-employee for the evening, technically, but still. He didn't do Brooklyn. He certainly didn't do impromptu dinner invitations from women who worked for him. The board would have a field day if they found out. Victor Harding would never let him hear the end of it. But his feet kept moving, wearing a path in the marble floor, and his mind kept circling back to one brutal truth. When was the last time anyone had invited him anywhere that wasn't a business obligation? When was the last time someone had looked at him and seen Dominic instead of Dominic Ashford, billionaire real estate mogul, king of Manhattan's skyline? His phone buzzed. A text from his assistant. Vanderbilt Gala still has a seat reserved if you change your mind. They're expecting you. They were always expecting him. The galas, the The charity dinners, the networking events where people smiled and shook his hand and wanted something from him. Always something. Dominic looked at his reflection in the darkening window. 42 years old, and he barely recognized himself anymore. When had the lines around his mouth gotten so deep? When had his eyes started looking so empty? He thought about Sophia's words. No one should be alone tonight. At 7:15, he grabbed his coat. The car ride across the Brooklyn Bridge felt like crossing into another world. His driver, Marcus, who'd been with him for 8 years and probably knew him better than anyone, caught his eye in the rearview mirror. "Brooklyn, sir? That's unusual. Just drive, Marcus." Snow had begun to fall, thick and heavy, muffling the city sounds. Christmas music drifted from passing cars. Families hurried along the sidewalks, arms laden with gifts and groceries, heading toward warm homes and people who loved them. Dominic pressed his forehead against the cold window and tried to remember what that felt like. They pulled up to a modest brownstone on a tree-lined street. Lights glowed in windows. He could hear laughter from somewhere, a child squealing with delight. The building was old, the brick weathered, the steps worn smooth by 100 years of footsteps. It was nothing like his building, with its doorman and marble lobby and elevator that required a key card to access the upper floors. It looked like a home. "Should I wait, sir?" Marcus asked. Dominic stared up at the building. For stories. No elevator, he'd bet. Sophia had said apartment 4C. Give me an hour. I'll text if I need you to come back." "Very good, sir." If Marcus was surprised, he didn't show it. Dominic climbed out into the snow. For a moment, standing on the sidewalk with fat snowflakes landing on his shoulders, he almost got back in the car. Almost told Marcus to take him home to his empty penthouse and his ritual glass of scotch and another Christmas Eve alone. But then he thought about Sophia's eyes, the way she'd looked at him like he was worth saving, and he started walking. For flights of stairs. No elevator, just as he'd predicted. By the 3rd floor, Dominic was breathing hard. When was the last time he'd climbed stairs instead of taking elevators? His thighs burned. Somewhere between the 3rd and 4th floor, he started laughing at himself. Billionaire real estate developer, brought down by a walk-up apartment building. By the time he reached apartment 4C, his heart was hammering, though whether from exertion or anxiety or something else entirely, he couldn't say. Music drifted through the door, salsa, warm and alive, the horns bright and the rhythm infectious. The smell of cooking made his stomach clench with an emotion he couldn't name. Something old, something buried. He knocked before he could change his mind. Footsteps. The door opened. Sophia's face went through a series of expressions in rapid succession. Surprise, then understanding, then something soft and genuine that made his chest ache. "You came," she said, and there was no triumph in her voice. Just quiet pleasure. "I did." Dominic stood awkwardly in the hallway, suddenly aware of how overdressed he was. His cashmere coat probably cost more than her monthly rent. "I can leave if I'm... Don't be ridiculous. Come in." She stepped aside, and after a heartbeat of hesitation, he crossed the threshold. The apartment was tiny, maybe 600 square feet, if he was being generous. Everything his penthouse wasn't. Where his place was all clean lines and minimalism, hers was cluttered with life. Mismatched furniture that looked like it had been collected over years from thrift stores and street corners. Family photos covering every available surface. Sophia as a child, an older woman who must be her grandmother, cousins and aunts and uncles. Christmas lights strung haphazardly across the ceiling, the cheap kind from the hardware store, but they glowed warm and welcoming. A small Christmas tree sat in the corner, decorated with handmade ornaments. Not the designer trees you could buy already decorated from Bergdorf's, but something real, something loved. It was cluttered and warm and so utterly alive that Dominic felt like an intruder from some sterile dimension. "Sit," Sophia said, gesturing to a small kitchen table that had 2 chairs and looked like it had been painted at least 3 times, different colors showing through where the paint had chipped. "I hope you're hungry. I may weigh too much food." He sat. The chair wobbled slightly under his weight. In his penthouse, everything was custom-made, perfectly balanced, designed to last centuries. This chair had probably come from a garage sale and would fall apart in 5 years. He'd never sat in anything more comfortable. Sophia moved around the kitchen with easy confidence, and he watched, mesmerized by the simple domesticity of it. When had he last watched someone cook? When had he last eaten anything that wasn't catered or delivered or prepared by his personal chef, who knew better than to try to make conversation? She pulled tamales from a steamer, the corn husks dark with moisture. The smell that rose up made something in Dominic's chest crack open. Pork and chili and masa, and something else, something indefinable. The smell of care, of time taken, of love. My abuela used to make these every Christmas Eve, Sophia said, arranging them on plates with rice and beans. She'd start before dawn, making the masa by hand. Said the machine-ground corn didn't have the right texture. I'd wake up to the sound of her singing and the smell of chili Colorado simmering on the stove. She set a plate in front of him, tamales, rice, beans, all homemade. Steam rose from the plate, carrying memories Dominic thought he'd buried. She passed away last year, Sophia continued, sitting across from him with her own plate. Right after Thanksgiving. I came to New York in January. Fresh start, you know? But my first Christmas here. She paused, stared at her plate. It was hard, really hard. I'm sorry, Dominic said, and meant it. Thank you. She looked up, smiled. But this year is better. This year I have you, even if you do look terrified of a tamale. Despite everything, Dominic laughed. Actually laughed, and the sound startled him. When was the last time he'd laughed? Really laughed. Not the polite chuckle he used in business meetings. He unwrapped the corn husk carefully. The tamale inside was perfect, the masa tender, the pork falling apart, the sauce rich and complex. He took a bite. The world stopped. He was 8 years old again, sitting in his mother's kitchen in their old house upstate. Before the money, before the empire. When Christmas meant his mother singing while she cooked, and his father building a fire, and him believing that life would always feel this safe, this warm, this good. His mother had made tamales. Just once the Christmas before she died. She'd learned from a friend at work, spent all day making them, and Dominic had eaten 5 of them while she laughed and told him he'd make himself sick. He'd forgotten. God, he'd forgotten. Tears pricked his eyes. He closed them, willing the moisture away, but it was too late. A single tear escaped, tracking down his cheek. Dominic, Sophia's voice was soft. He opened his eyes. She was watching him with concern and understanding, and he realized she called him by his first name. Why had he stopped being Mr. Ashford? It's perfect, he whispered, his voice rough. My mother made tamales once. Just once the Christmas before. He stopped, couldn't finish. Before she died? Sophia asked gently. He nodded. Car accident. The week before Christmas. I was 25. My father was driving. Black ice on the Taconic Parkway. The words came out flat, emotionless, because that's how he'd trained himself to say them. Facts. Just facts. Not the worst moment of his life. Not the thing that broke him. I'm so sorry, Sophia said, and her hand reached across the table, fingers brushing his. The touch unlocked something. Words he'd never spoken aloud spilled out between bites of food that tasted like home. How he'd thrown himself into building his empire, because if he stopped moving, stopped working, he might actually feel something. How 15 Christmases had passed in silence, because celebrating felt like betrayal. How he'd built walls so high and thick that he'd forgotten there was a world outside them. I stopped feeling anything, he admitted, staring at his hands. Hands that signed billion-dollar deals but hadn't touched another human being with genuine affection in years. It was easier that way. Safer. If I didn't let anyone in, they couldn't leave. Couldn't die. Couldn't take pieces of me with them. Sophia's fingers tightened on his. And now I'm terrified, he said honestly, looking up to meet her eyes. Because you're making me feel things again, and I don't know if I remember how. I don't know if I even want to. Feeling hurts. Her smile was sad and understanding and beautiful. It does. But it's also the only way to be alive. They finished eating in comfortable silence. Sophia told him about her grandmother. How she'd raised Sophia after her parents died in a fire when Sophia was 6. How her abuela had worked 2 jobs to keep them fed, but always made time to cook. How she taught Sophia that food was love made visible. She used to say that anyone who cooks for you is giving you a piece of their heart, Sophia said. That's why restaurant food never tastes as good as home cooking, because it doesn't have love in it. Dominic thought about all the meals he'd eaten in the past 15 years. Catered, delivered, prepared by chefs who were paid handsomely but didn't know him, didn't care about him beyond their paycheck. I can't remember the last time someone cooked for me, he said. Actually cooked, not as a job, but as a gift. Then I'm glad you came tonight, Sophia said softly. They moved to her worn couch with coffee. The cushions sagged in the middle, forcing them to sit closer than they might have otherwise. Dominic found he didn't mind. Sophia pulled out photo albums, actual physical albums, not digital files on a phone, and showed him pictures of her life. Her grandmother's house in Phoenix, small but painted bright blue. Abuela's favorite color, Sophia said. Family gatherings where dozens of people crowded into that small house, spilling into the yard. Sophia, as a child, gap-toothed and grinning. As a teenager, all awkward angles and determination. As a young woman, standing next to her grandmother at her high school graduation, both of them beaming. She was so proud, Sophia said, touching the photo gently. I was the first in our family to graduate high school. She cried through the whole ceremony. Did you go to college? Dominic asked. Community college for 2 years. Associates in hospitality. She shrugged. Couldn't afford more. And then Abuela got sick. Spent the next 5 years taking care of her. No bitterness in her voice. Just fact. And when she passed, I had nothing left in Phoenix. No family. No job I cared about. So I came here. Figured if I was going to start over, might as well go big. She laughed, but there was pain underneath. Turns out starting over is terrifying and lonely and way harder than I thought. Dominic understood that more than she knew. Why housekeeping? Because I could start immediately. Didn't need a degree or references or, she stopped, looked at him. I'm good at it. I like making spaces beautiful for people. But it's not what I want to do forever. What do you want? Sophia's face transformed. I want to be a chef. Not fancy French cuisine or molecular gastronomy or any of that pretentious stuff. I want to cook the food my grandmother taught me. I want to open a restaurant that feels like her house, where people come and feel like family, where the food is made with love and served with warmth, and people leave feeling full in their souls, not just their stomachs. The passion in her voice made Dominic's chest ache. When was the last time he'd wanted something that badly? When had ambition turned from passion to obligation? That's a beautiful dream, he said. It's a dream that requires money I don't have, Sophia said pragmatically. So for now, I clean houses and say what I can and take online culinary classes when I have time. Maybe someday. Someday, Dominic repeated. The word felt foreign in his mouth. He didn't do someday. He did quarterly projections and 5-year plans and acquisitions. But listening to Sophia talk about her dreams, he realized he couldn't remember the last time he dreamed about something he wanted, not something his board wanted or his shareholders expected or his competitors would respect. His phone buzzed. He'd forgotten about it, lost in conversation. Now it vibrated insistently against his thigh, and reality came crashing back. He pulled it out. 15 texts in rapid succession, all from Victor Harding, his business partner and the man who'd helped him build Ashford Properties into what it was today. Hampton deal collapsed. Investors pulling out. Riverside development in jeopardy. Dominion Capital backing out. Emergency board meeting tomorrow, 8 a.m. Mandatory attendance. Where the hell are you? Not answering office line or cell. Call me immediately. Stock down 8% on rumors. Need statement from you. Press office waiting. More messages followed. Board members. His assistant. His lawyer. Press inquiries. The world he'd left behind for a few hours, demanding his attention with the urgency of a building on fire. Sophia saw his face change. Watched the transformation happen in real time. The way his shoulders straightened, his jaw tightened, that hard CEO mask sliding back in a place like armor. She knew that look. She'd seen it before, had learned to read the subtle shifts in his expression that meant he was retreating behind his walls. You need to take that, she said. It wasn't a question. I should. He stared at the phone like it was a bomb. More texts came through. His phone was vibrating constantly now, a steady pulse of demands and crises and people needing him to fix things. It's okay. Sophia's voice had gone careful, guarded. She was protecting herself, he realized, getting ready for him to leave. I understand. Your work is important. Dominic looked at her, at the phone, back at her. 15 years of conditioning screamed at him to answer, to fix it, to be the man everyone needed him to be. The Hampton deal was worth $2 billion. If it fell through, hundreds of jobs would be lost. His reputation would take a hit. The board would question his leadership. But for the first time in 15 years, a different voice whispered, "What about what you need?" He looked at Sophia, really looked at her. At this woman who'd invited him into her home, fed him food, made with love, shared her dreams and her pain, and asked nothing in return. Who'd seen him, truly seen him, not Dominic Ashford the billionaire, but Dominic the man, lonely and lost and desperate for connection, even if he couldn't admit it. His phone vibrated again. Victor calling now, not just texting. Dominic silenced it. Then, very deliberately, he turned the phone face down on the coffee table. "It can wait until tomorrow," he said, and watched relief bloom across Sophia's face like sunrise. "Are you sure?" she asked. That seemed urgent. Everything seems urgent to Victor. Dominic leaned back against the sagging couch cushions. "But the world won't end if I don't answer for one night." The Hampton deal was shaky from the start. If it collapsed, it was going to happen whether I'm on my phone or not. And the board. He laughed hollow. The board will still be angry tomorrow whether I call them tonight or not. "You sound tired," Sophia observed. "I am." The admission surprised him. "I'm so tired, Sophia. I've been tired for 15 years. She shifted closer, her shoulder touching his. "Then rest. Just for tonight. Let the world handle itself." So he did. They talked until past midnight, the conversation flowing easy and natural in a way Dominic couldn't remember experiencing before. They talked about everything and nothing. Sophia's favorite movies, romantic comedies that made her cry. His secret love of jazz. He used to play saxophone in high school. Her fear of dogs, bitten as a child. His inability to keep plants alive. He'd killed 7 succulents in the past year alone. 7. Sophia laughed. They're literally called succulents because they survive with almost no care. "I'm aware," Dominic said dryly. "Apparently, I have a black thumb to go with my black heart." "You don't have a black heart." Sophia's voice went serious. "Frozen, maybe, guarded, but not black. What's the difference? A black heart can't thaw. A frozen one just needs warmth." She looked at him, and in the glow of the Christmas lights, her eyes were impossibly soft. And time, and someone willing to wait while it melts. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Dominic could feel the heat of her body next to his, smell her perfume, something floral and subtle that made him think of summer. His gaze dropped to her lips, and he saw her breath catch. His phone erupted, not a single vibration, but a cacophony of them. It danced across the coffee table, screen lighting up with notification after notification. Dominic flinched like he'd been slapped. The spell broke. Sophia pulled back slightly, and the loss of her warmth felt like a physical ache. He grabbed the phone, read the messages scrolling past. The situation was deteriorating. Stock now down 12%. Board members threatening to call an emergency vote. Media outlets running stories about his mysterious disappearance. Victor's latest text was all caps. "Get to the office now, or I'm calling a vote of no confidence." Dominic stood abruptly. The room spun slightly. When had it gotten so late? His watch said 2:47 a.m. He'd been here for over 7 hours. 7 hours while his empire crumbled. "I have to," he started. "I know," Sophia said quietly. She stood too, wrapping her arms around herself. "It's late anyway. You should go." But he didn't move toward the door. Couldn't seem to make his feet work. Because going meant returning to that world of crises and demands, and people who needed him to be strong and perfect and always in control. And standing here in this small, warm apartment with this woman who saw him, really saw him. He didn't want to be that person anymore. "I don't want to go," he admitted. But you're going to anyway, Sophia said, and there was understanding in her voice, but also disappointment. I have to. People are depending on me. Jobs, investments, futures. I know. She walked to the door, opened it. Cold air from the hallway rushed in. Thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Ashford. It meant a lot. Mr. Ashford. They were back to that. The formality stung more than it should have. Dominic moved to the door, then stopped. Turn back. Sophia. It's okay, she said, but her eyes were too bright. I knew what this was. One nice evening. Nothing more. That's not. He didn't know how to finish that sentence. What was this? What did he want it to be? Merry Christmas, Dominic, she said softly, using his first name one more time. It sounded like goodbye. He wanted to kiss her. Wanted to tell her this wasn't just one evening. That something had shifted tonight. That he couldn't remember the last time he'd felt this alive. But his phone was buzzing again, and the real world was calling, and he was a coward. Merry Christmas, Sophia, he said, and left. The walk down 4 flights of stairs felt longer than the walk up. Marcus was waiting with the car, had probably been waiting for hours, patient and silent. Dominic climbed into the back seat and immediately pulled out his phone to deal with the crisis. But his hand hovered over the screen. He could still smell Sophia's perfume on his clothes, still taste the tamales, still feel the warmth of her apartment like a physical memory. Home, sir? Marcus asked. Dominic looked back at the brownstone. A light was still on in Sophia's window. Was she watching him leave? Regretting that she'd invited him? Relieved he was gone? Yes, he said finally. Home. The word felt like a lie. The car ride back to Manhattan felt surreal, like traveling between dimensions. Brooklyn's brownstones gave way to glass towers. Small restaurants became high-end boutiques. The snow that had looked magical in Sophia's neighborhood just looked cold against his building's chrome and glass facade. Dominic's phone didn't stop the entire ride. By the time he reached his penthouse, he had 73 unread messages and 22 missed calls. He poured himself that ritual glass of scotch and sat in the dark, staring out at the city. Somewhere out there, Sophia was probably in bed, maybe thinking about him, maybe already regretting the evening. Maybe relieved he was gone and wouldn't make things complicated. He thought about what she'd said. A frozen heart just needs warmth and time and someone willing to wait while it melts. Was his heart melting? It felt more like cracking, breaking, shattering into pieces that might not fit back together the same way. At 3:45 a.m., Dominic finally opened Victor's messages and started typing responses. By 4:30, he put out the worst of the fires. By 5 o'clock, he'd sent a statement to the press office. By 5:30, he'd confirmed his attendance at the emergency board meeting. At 6 a.m., as the sun began to rise over Manhattan, Dominic realized he couldn't remember falling asleep in Sophia's apartment. Couldn't remember the car ride home. His mind had been somewhere else, in a small Brooklyn apartment that smelled like tamales and Christmas lights, with a woman who saw him. He needed to sleep. Had a board meeting in 2 hours. But when he closed his eyes, all he could see was Sophia's face. The disappointment when he'd left. The resignation. His phone rang. Victor, where the hell were you last night? Victor demanded without preamble. Out. Out? The company is imploding, and you were out? The company isn't imploding. The Hampton deal was always risky. We knew that going in. The board doesn't see it that way. They see a CEO who disappeared during a crisis, who didn't answer his phone for 7 hours. Who? I'll be at the meeting, Dominic interrupted. I'll handle it. You better. Because right now, they're talking about removing you. The line went dead. Dominic stared at his phone. 15 years he'd built Ashford Properties. From a small development firm his father had started to a multi-billion-dollar empire. His entire adult life poured into this company. And last night, for 7 hours, he'd forgotten it existed. He should be terrified, should be crafting his defense, preparing his arguments, reminding the board why he was indispensable. Instead, he was thinking about Sophia's laugh, the way her face lit up when she talked about her dreams, how she'd looked at him like he was worth saving. Dominic showered, dressed in his armor, custom Tom Ford suit, Italian leather shoes, his father's watch. Put on the face he wore to board meetings and negotiations. The face that said he was in control, always in control, invincible. But as he stood in front of the mirror, straightening his tie, he barely recognized himself. The emergency board meeting was exactly as brutal as expected. Victor had rallied support. 5 of the 12 board members were prepared to vote for Dominic's removal as CEO. The Hampton deal's collapse was being framed as a failure of leadership. His disappearance last night as dereliction of duty. Dominic sat through their accusations and barely heard them. His mind kept wandering back to that small apartment in Brooklyn, to tamales and Christmas lights, and a woman who asked nothing from him except the courage to be himself. "Are you even listening?" Victor demanded. Dominic blinked. Focused. "Yes. You want me out. We want you present," one of the older board members said. "We want the Dominic Ashford who built this company. Not whoever you've been the past 6 months, distracted, disengaged, making reckless decisions." Had he been distracted? Dominic thought back. Maybe. Ever since Sophia had started working for him, something had been shifting. He'd started noticing things, how empty his penthouse felt, how hollow his victories seemed, how every success just led to another deal, another acquisition, another thing that didn't actually matter. "I'll be direct," Victor said. "Either you recommit fully to this company, or we find someone who will." Dominic looked around the boardroom, at these men and women he'd worked with for years. Some he respected, some he barely tolerated. None of them knew him. Not really. "I need some time," he heard himself say. "Time." Victor's face turned red. "We don't have time. We need a decision now." "Then you have it." Dominic stood. "I'm stepping back. Hire a CEO to run day-to-day operations. I'll remain as chairman, but I'm done with this." He gestured at the table, at them, at the whole corporate theater of it. The room erupted. Victor was shouting. Other board members were talking over each other. Someone mentioned fiduciary responsibility. Someone else brought up shareholder value. Dominic walked out. In the elevator down, his phone exploded with calls and messages. He turned it off. Completely off. The elevator doors opened onto the lobby. His assistant was there, panic in her eyes. "Mr. Ashford, the board." "Handle it," he said, and walked past her. Outside, the city was bright with Christmas morning light. Families walked past with shopping bags and tired, happy faces. The world hadn't ended. His company would survive, or it wouldn't. Either way, the sun would rise tomorrow. Dominic stood on the sidewalk, watching people pass, and felt something in his chest. The ice that had lived there for 15 years began to crack. He pulled out his phone, turned it on, ignored the flood of messages, and found Sophia's number. His thumb hovered over the call button. What did he even say? "Sorry I left. Sorry I chose my company over you. Sorry I'm a coward who doesn't know how to be human anymore." Before he could decide, a text came through. From Sophia. "Thank you for last night. I hope you got everything sorted out. Merry Christmas." Formal. Distant. Everything they'd built last night, crumbling into professional politeness. Dominic stared at the message. Then, instead of texting back, he called his driver. "Marcus, I need you to take me somewhere." "Of course, sir." "Where to?" Dominic gave him Sophia's address. "And Marcus?" "Stop calling me sir. My name is Dominic." The ride to Brooklyn felt different in daylight. The bridge traffic was light. Most people already where they wanted to be. The neighborhoods slowly transformed from glass and steel to brick and brownstone. From Christmas decorations that cost thousands to simple lights strung with love. When they pulled up to Sophia's building, Dominic sat in the car, staring up at her window. What was he doing? He'd walked out on her a few hours ago, chosen his company over her. Why would she even open the door? But he thought about what she'd said, about frozen hearts needing warmth, about having the courage to thaw. He climbed out of the car, climbed those 4 flights again, stood outside her door, hand raised to knock, heart pounding. Before he could, the door opened. Sophia stood there in pajama pants and an oversized sweatshirt, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying. "I saw your car from the window," she said quietly. "I'm sorry," Dominic blurted out. "For last night. For leaving. For choosing." He stopped, started again. "I've spent 15 years building walls, convincing myself that work was enough, that success was enough, that I didn't need anything else. And then you invited me to dinner and fed me tamales and looked at me like I was worth saving, and I got scared. Sophia didn't say anything, just watched him with those dark, knowing eyes. I just walked out of an emergency board meeting, Dominic continued. Told them I was stepping back, that they could find someone else to run the company. And you know what the first thing I thought was? Not about the stock price or the investors or my reputation. I thought about you, about how you looked at me last night, like I was capable of being more than just a CEO, like I was worth knowing. Sophia's eyes filled with tears. Dominic, I don't know how to do this, he said desperately. I don't know how to let someone in. I'm terrified that I'll hurt you or disappoint you or go back to being that frozen person because it's easier than feeling. But I'm more terrified of walking away and spending the rest of my life wondering what if. What are you saying? Sophia's voice was barely a whisper. I'm saying I don't want to go back to that empty penthouse. I'm saying last night was the first time in 15 years I felt like myself. I'm saying, he stopped, took a breath. I'm saying please let me try. Let me figure out how to be human again. With you. For a long moment, Sophia just looked at him. Then she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. Dominic stood frozen for a heartbeat. When was the last time someone had hugged him? Before his arms came up and held her tight. You're doing fine so far, she whispered against his chest. They stood in her doorway, holding each other while Christmas morning light streamed through the windows, and Dominic felt something in his chest finally, fully break open. Not breaking like shattering, breaking like blooming. Come inside, Sophia said, pulling back. I have coffee and leftover tamales for breakfast. That sounds perfect, Dominic said, and followed her into the warmth. They spent Christmas Day together. Sophia showed Dominic how to make café de olla, Mexican coffee with cinnamon and piloncillo. They walked through Prospect Park, watching families play in the snow. Dominic couldn't remember the last time he'd walked anywhere that wasn't from a car to a building entrance. His feet got cold. His nose turned red. He loved every minute of it. This is what normal people do on Christmas, he asked, watching a father teach his daughter to make a snowball. This is what happy people do on Christmas, Sophia corrected. They built a small snowman. It was lopsided and started melting immediately, but Dominic felt absurdly proud of it. Sophia took a picture with her phone, and he realized he was smiling. Really smiling. Not the practiced corporate smile, but something genuine. Over the next week, Dominic's life transformed in ways he couldn't have imagined. He went to his office for a few hours each day to handle the transition, hiring a new CEO, restructuring his role to chairman, dealing with the board's fury and the press's speculation. But his heart wasn't in it anymore. His heart was in a small Brooklyn apartment where a woman taught him to cook and laugh and feel. Sophia quit before he could ask her to. I can't work for you if we're doing this, she said. Whatever this is. What is this? Dominic asked. I don't know yet. She smiled, a little nervous, a lot hopeful. But I want to find out. She enrolled full-time in culinary school, starting in January. When Dominic offered to pay her tuition, she gave him a look that could have frozen hell itself. I need to do this on my own, she said firmly. I need to know I earned it. I understand, Dominic said, and he did. Pride, independence, the need to prove yourself. He understood that more than she knew. But, Sophia added softer now, maybe you could taste test my homework assignments? I would be honored. New Year's Eve approached, and Dominic realized with something like panic that he'd committed to attending the Metropolitan Museum Charity Gala. He'd purchased a table months ago, one of those obligations that came with his position. I don't have to go, he told Sophia. We could stay in, watch the ball drop on TV, drink cheap champagne. Or, Sophia said carefully, you could take me with you. Dominic's first instinct was to say no. The gala was his world. Old money and new money, and everyone judging everyone else's net worth. Taking Sophia would be making a statement, would open her up to scrutiny and gossip, and people who would look down on her because she'd been his housekeeper. But then he thought about what he was really saying, that he was ashamed of her, that she wasn't good enough for his world, when the truth was, his world wasn't good enough for her. I would love to take you, he said, but I need you to know, those people can be cruel. They'll whisper, they'll judge, they'll make assumptions. Let them, Sophia said. I know who I am. Do you? The question hit home. Did he know who he was anymore? Not the CEO, not the billionaire, not the man the board expected him to be. Just Dominic. I'm figuring it out, he said. With your help. Then that's all that matters. New Year's Eve arrived cold and clear. Sophia wore a dress she'd found at a consignment shop. Simple, elegant, deep blue that made her skin glow. Not designer, not expensive, but she looked more beautiful than any woman Dominic had ever seen. The gala was exactly as he'd expected. The Metropolitan Museum transformed into a glittering wonderland. Women in gowns that cost more than cars. Men in tuxedos, discussing deals and acquisitions. Champagne flowing like water. String quartet playing while people pretended to care about culture. The stares started the moment they entered. Heads turning. Whispers beginning. Dominic felt Sophia's hand tighten on his arm, but she kept her head high, her expression serene. Dominic Ashford, a woman's voice called out. Chelsea Whitmore, a socialite Dominic had dated briefly 3 years ago before realizing she was more interested in his bank account than him. How wonderful to see you. And who is this? Sophia Hill, Dominic said clearly. Sophia, this is Chelsea Whitmore. Charmed, Chelsea said, her eyes taking in Sophia's dress, her simple jewelry, cataloging and dismissing. Hill, that's Spanish, isn't it? How exotic. Mexican, Sophia said calmly. My grandmother was from Oaxaca. How wonderful, Chelsea said in a tone that meant the opposite. And how did you two meet? Here it was. The moment of truth. Dominic could deflect, could make something up, could protect Sophia from the judgment he knew was coming. Or he could tell the truth. Sophia was my housekeeper, he said clearly, loudly enough that nearby conversations paused. 3 months ago, she invited me to Christmas Eve dinner. She made tamales from her grandmother's recipe and reminded me what it felt like to be human. She's the bravest, most honest person I've ever met. And I'm lucky she's here with me tonight. The silence that followed was deafening. Chelsea's smile turned brittle. Other people were openly staring now. Then Victor Harding appeared, drink in hand, Chelsea's date for the evening. Of course. Dominic, Victor said, false bonhomie dripping from every word. Surprised to see you here after your dramatic exit from the board meeting. Though I suppose I shouldn't be surprised you brought staff to the event. Sophia stiffened beside him. Dominic felt rage, white-hot and purifying, flood through him. Watch your mouth, Victor, he said quietly, dangerously. Oh, come on. Victor laughed, looking around at the gathering crowd like they were all in on the joke. We're all thinking it. Dominic Ashford, abandoning his company for what? A rebound fling with the help? How very Hollywood of you. That's enough, Dominic said. Is it? Victor stepped closer, his voice dropping but still loud enough for others to hear. You threw away 15 years for this? You walked away from everything we built for a woman who has more integrity in her little finger than you have in your entire body. Dominic cut him off, his voice ringing through the sudden silence. Sophia is honest. She's brave. She sees people, really sees them, instead of calculating their net worth and what she can get from them. He turned, addressing not just Victor, but everyone who was listening. And they were all listening now. I spent 15 years building an empire, he continued. 15 years thinking that success meant money and power and having my name on buildings. And I was miserable. I was empty. I was slowly dying and calling it ambition. His voice caught. Sophia saved my life. Not by being impressive or wealthy or connected. By seeing me. By having the courage to invite me into her home and feed me food made with love and remind me that being human matters more than being successful. He looked down at Sophia. Her eyes were shining with tears, but she was smiling. So yes, Victor, I walked away from the company. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat. Because what's the point of building an empire if you're too dead inside to enjoy it? The crowd was completely silent now. Dominic turned back to Victor, who looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. Now if you'll excuse us, Dominic said, Sophia and I are going to dance. He led her to the dance floor. Behind them, conversations slowly resumed, but he didn't care. Didn't care what they thought or said or whispered. All that mattered was Sophia in his arms, looking up at him like he'd just slay dragons. That was, she started. Long overdue, he finished. I'm sorry I didn't say it sooner. I'm sorry I ever let you feel like you were anything less than extraordinary. You're pretty extraordinary yourself, she said softly. They danced as the string quartet played, oblivious to the stares and whispers. At some point, other couples joined them on the floor. The gala continued around them. But in that moment, they were alone in their own world. At 11:30, Dominic led Sophia away from the crowd, up the museum's back stairs to a small terrace that was technically off-limits, but he'd charmed the security guard with a $100 tip. The terrace overlooked Central Park, and beyond it, the glittering lights of Manhattan stretched to the horizon. It's beautiful, Sophia breathed. It is, Dominic agreed, but he was looking at her. She turned to face him. Thank you for what you said down there, for standing up for me. I should have done it sooner. Should have done it the moment we walked in and I saw how they were looking at you. He took her hands. I've been a coward for so long, Sophia, hiding behind work and walls and excuses. But you make me want to be brave. You are brave, she said. You just forgot for a while. In the distance, they could hear the gala counting down to midnight. 10, 9, 8. I have something to tell you, Dominic said, suddenly nervous in a way he hadn't been in business negotiations worth billions. And I know it's too soon, and I know I'm probably going to mess this up because I'm terrible at feelings, but Dominic, Sophia said gently, just say it. I'm falling in love with you. The words rushed out. Maybe I already have fallen in love with you. I don't know. I haven't felt like this since. He stopped, started again. You make me want to be better, to do better, not for the board or the shareholders or anyone else. Just for you, just to deserve you. 3, 2, 1. Happy New Year. The shout echoed from inside the museum. Fireworks exploded over Central Park. The sky lit up in cascades of gold and silver and blue. The city erupted in celebration, and Dominic kissed Sophia as Manhattan burst into light around them. It was nothing like the tentative, careful kiss he'd imagined. It was desperate and honest, and full of all the longing he'd been holding back. Sophia kissed him back just as fiercely, her hands in his hair, her body pressed against his. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Sophia was crying and laughing at the same time. I'm falling in love with you too, she said. In case that wasn't clear. Dominic laughed, actually laughed, giddy and overwhelmed and more alive than he'd felt in 15 years. I was hoping, but nothing. She kissed him again, softer this time. I see you, Dominic Ashford. All of you. The broken parts and the healing parts and the parts that are still figuring it out. And I'm not going anywhere. Promise? He whispered. Promise. They stayed on the terrace while fireworks painted the sky, while the city celebrated below, while the old year died and the new one was born. Eventually, the cold drove them back inside, but Dominic barely noticed. He was warm in a way that had nothing to do with temperature. The gala wound down. People congratulated him on the new year with varying degrees of sincerity. Victor avoided him entirely. Chelsea shot daggers with her eyes. Dominic didn't care about any of it. At 2 in the morning, exhausted and happy, they finally left. Marcus was waiting with the car. Where to, he asked. Dominic looked at Sophia. Your place. Our place, she said. If you want. I want, he said firmly. So they drove to Brooklyn, to that modest brownstone with its worn steps and missing elevator. They climbed 4 flights of stairs, laughing and shushing each other so they wouldn't wake the neighbors. Sophia unlocked her door, and they tumbled inside. The apartment looked different now to Dominic. Not small or cluttered, just full of life, full of Sophia, and now maybe full of him too. They made coffee, cafe de olla with cinnamon and piloncillo, sat on the sagging couch wrapped in blankets. Through the windows, the first light of the new year crept across Brooklyn's rooftops. Any regrets? Sophia asked quietly. Dominic thought about his penthouse, standing empty 42 stories above Manhattan. About the company he'd spent 15 years building, now being run by someone else. About the board seat he'd probably lose and the reputation he'd definitely damaged and all the things that used to matter so much. Then he looked at Sophia, curled up beside him, her head on his shoulder, her hand in his. Looked around this small, warm apartment that felt more like home than anywhere he'd lived. "Not a single one," he said. She smiled and kissed his cheek. They sat together in comfortable silence as the sun rose on a new year, a new beginning, a new life. Dominic had spent 15 years building an empire of glass and steel and cold ambition. Now, in a tiny Brooklyn apartment with a woman who'd had the courage to invite him to dinner, he was learning to build something better. He was learning to build a home. And home, he was discovering, wasn't a place or a building or anything you could buy. Home was where someone saw you, truly saw you, and loved you anyway. Home was tamales made with recipes passed down through generations. Home was climbing 4 flights of stairs and not minding because Sophia was waiting at the top. Home was being brave enough to thaw, to feel, to let yourself be human again. Outside, Brooklyn was waking up. Inside, Dominic Ashford was finally alive. If this story of second chances and choosing love over fear touched your heart, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Tell us about a time you had to choose between what was expected and what was real. And don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding home in unexpected places, because sometimes the best things in life are the ones we never saw coming. Hit that like button if you believe it's never too late to start living again, and share this with someone who needs to remember that being human is more important than being successful. New stories every week, because everyone deserves their own second chance at happiness.